business and technology leaders of Greater New York to discuss management and technology best practices and opportunities. We've been doing this for about 6 years. You know, all of it's been in person. Like David mentioned, it's the 31st event. And, you know, we're doing a webinar for the first time, and we're doing a panel for the first time. It's usually a fireside chat with a one-on-one guest. So I'm your host, Deepak Lalwani. Me along with Bruno Scapp are the founders. And so I have a boutique management consultancy, and that specializes in enterprise technology implementation and adoption. And I've been doing that for 6 years as well. I'm going to have our wonderful speakers introduce themselves with a little more color. I know we have Sandeep Binod. He very often goes by Sandy, with CEO and founder of Radius 8. We have the Vice President of Consumer Insights with Simrise. I hope I said that right.
You just forgot the marketing part, but yeah, that's fine.
Marketing and Consumer Insights, Vice President Emmanuel LaRoche. And we have Emily Kagan Trenchard, Vice President of Digital and Innovation Strategy at Northwell Health. Hey, Emily, why don't we go around the room? So, Emily, Emmanuel, why don't we start with you? Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? And
sure.
Yeah.
So the guy with the French accent here. So I work for a German company, which is funny. It's called Simrise. Maybe you never heard of it. It's not known from, let's say, the consumers. It's really a business to business. And we are providing a solution for our customers in the field of flavors, nutrition, and fragrances. So we are based in Germany. The company makes 3.5 billion euro. We have about 10,000 employees around the world. We have a portfolio of about 30,000 products, 6,000 customers more or less, and we are in 160 countries. And I am in charge of marketing and consumer insight for North America. And I've been in the US from like almost 18 years now. And otherwise, you know, I manage a group of about 15 people. Yeah, personally, I love food. You probably can tell. And I have a personal podcast called Flavors Unknown. So if you are interested, the world of chefs, I have conversations with them and with pastry chefs and mixologists around the US. And yeah, Flavors Unknown. So if you want to listen to it, it's on every podcast app, and Flavors Unknown on Instagram if you want to follow. And thank you for inviting me. I'm very excited to be part of the panel.
Yeah, thank you. It's great to have you. Sandeep, what about you?
Hi, everybody. My name is Sandeep Binod. I'm the co-founder and CEO at a company called Radius 8. It's a tech company that basically uses the location context of a digital consumer to change the e-commerce experience based on where they are. So the whole idea here is, why does your e-commerce site look the same no matter where your consumer is? We solve that issue, and we use location context as a way to drive outcomes for a retailer or any enterprise for that matter that wants to drive more in-store traffic or online conversion. You know, my background is my second company. My first company was also in retail technology. We exited that business to one of the largest payment terminal manufacturers in the world at the time, a company called Verifone in 2011. So, you know, it's been interesting sort of being able to build companies from cradle to grave and learn about sort of what it takes to build a business and build a team, a motivated team. And it's been super exciting, you know, doing this again, and certainly excited to be part of this panel. And thank you guys for inviting me. I'm really looking forward to the conversation.
You're quite welcome. Great to have you.
Yeah, Emily, do you want to jump in?
Sure. Hi all, my name is Emily Kagan-Trenchard. I'm the VP for Digital and Innovation Strategy for Northwell Health. And the focus for my area is really in the consumer-facing aspects of the digital tech. So not the cardiac life support monitors, but all of those tools that allow those patients to actually start to access points for care for themselves digitally. I started at Northwell. Actually, I started at Lenox Hill Hospital, and then we were acquired by Northwell many years ago. I started first in leading all of the consumer-facing web divisions, so everything from the websites to digital signage, social media, all those sort of touch points, and took that infrastructure through sort of a consolidation as we went from a system of multiple different hospitals down to a single one, to a single sort of brand, and had done some of that type of work.
Is there a fund behind him?
Yeah, if
Somebody have a question there?
Sorry, if we could
Yeah, but
mute your
phones.
So he's what? Fresh Thinking has funds feeding into him. So he's.
Hey,
yeah.
Craig, can you mute yourself, please? Thanks, buddy. Appreciate it. So we've done quite a bit of work in consolidating and replatforming web work, and had a good bit of success in seeing our website go from just sort of like what was essentially a glorified digital brochure to understanding a lot more of the digital capabilities. And then a few years back, myself and a few others in the company had made enough noise to say, look, this can't be a side hustle, right? Learning how to deliver care in a digital world needs to be part of the core of our business. So myself and a few others were tapped to lead a new division of the company, which we call DPX, the Digital Patient Experience. We're essentially like a startup inside of this really, really big health system. And in that, in that role, I got to stand up the first product team that we've ever had, user experience, user research division, analytics, really get into a lot more software development space for the company, which has been super exciting. And as you can imagine, in the context of this crisis, just supercharged in terms of the need for doing that. For those who don't know, Northwell Health is New York State's largest healthcare provider, 23 hospitals, over 700 practices, a medical school, a research institute, thousands of docs, 4.5 million patient touches, $13 billion organization. So it's a massive, massive footprint. And we've really been at the epicenter of New York's response to this crisis. So it's been quite a wild ride, and I'm really excited to actually get a chance to catch my breath, have a drink, and be in this conversation with you all.
No, that's great. And a quick call out to the sponsors. Brooklyn Winery. We also have Alimentary Brewery and X Matters. I'm going to ask the guests to hold your questions until the Q&A portion, about 15 minutes before 7 p.m. Eastern Standard. And Emily, let's just keep going with you. I'd love to get into the fireside chat and learn more about Northwell Health, especially in these times you were talking about some of the changes. What's one of the biggest challenges you think is facing leaders today?
I think one of the things you always have to grapple with as a leader is you sort of raise your hand to take on a higher level of uncertainty, right? Like you agree to sort of step up out of the known and look across what is the unknown and chart the course. I think it's very much new in this time in particular for leaders to have to grapple with uncertainty on just such a broad horizon, right? Like it used to just be you needed to just deal with the unknown in your own field. Right. And now there's unknowns with regards to whether or not your kids are going to be able to go to school and who's going to watch them, and are they going to come in and bomb your next meeting, let alone your supply chain, let alone food, let alone housing, let alone, are you going to make payroll? So just the sheer volume of uncertainty that leaders are facing now, to me, feels just like radically different than something we faced in any other context. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges that leaders are having to grapple with on scales we've never before had to as part of our core competency.
Yeah, I know. We're almost 3 months into the pandemic. They called the national emergency on March 13th. I remember because I put it in as a calendar invite in my own calendar and have been tracking it ever since. So how are you handling some of the uncertainty with Northwell Health? your footprint seems really big. How are you guys going about dealing with all the ambiguity? Like, what's the approach that you guys are taking?
Yeah, it's been really interesting to watch. I have to say, one of the things I'm most proud of Northwell and our organization is we actually do disasters fairly well, right? This isn't our first rodeo. Everything from hurricanes and Hurricane Sandy to other crises that have hit this region. We've been there, and so the emergency response component, while on historic scales, was something that felt like something we knew how to sort of mobilize the troops and move things into place, and not only do that for our organization, but also support Governor Cuomo and the work that's going on throughout the state. But I think the next phase, the next two phases, actually going to be interesting. So our leadership is calling the next phase the recovery phase. So what does it mean to not only have done the response, which was our first phase, but now get into recovery, ensure that patients are feeling like it's safe to come back and get the care for those who've been putting it off, for us to restart those surgical visits and things like that. But then also preparing ourselves for what we're calling the resurgence. We expect that in the fall, this will hit us again. What's that going to mean? What does business need to look like differently so that we're not going all the way back to where we were in March? And so I think that thinking about that in terms of we're not done when we're done, right?
Yeah.
Has been important to our planning strategy.
Yeah, I know we've been, I've been, I know a lot of folks have been working towards a vaccine. I've heard Dr. Fauci talk about it potentially hitting us in the fall. Let's talk about core values. Like we talked about you and some of the other leaders at Northwell Health working through this ambiguity. What's most important to you and Northwell Health in terms of mission, core values, or vision? What are some of the core values at Northwell Health, and what resonates with you the most?
So I think one of the things that's been interesting about this moment is that as tough as it's been on the staff, the clinical frontline staff, and indeed in all of us, there is this sense of connection to our mission that's just not been there before to the same extent that we have now, right? There's literally a clap that goes around this city at 7 o'clock at night, right? Like that everybody hears for the healthcare workers. And so the sense of connection to that work, I think, is deeper than it's ever been. But I think the secondary piece of that that's really core to Northwell that I'm seeing coming through is this sense of the need to be resourceful and innovative and creative on the fly, right? Everybody has had to do this. And whereas that was something we knew we wanted to do, we're in healthcare, we're risk averse, right? So you always like modulate that, or you're like, oh, well, it just happens over here. We don't have the time to be that kind of risk averse, right? There's this much greater risk out there. And so some of our core principles around innovation and around sort of connectedness to mission are now finding that the brakes are off in some of these places, right? And we're able to actually lean into that desire to be creative, but also that desire to move fast, to recombine, to remix, and to rethink how it is that we go about working. And I think that those core values are things that, had you asked me that question 6 months ago, I would have said, well, employee campaigns and ways that we make that manifest in different types of meetings and so forth. And in some ways, this crisis has been a bit of a blessing in disguise, in the sense that there's no greater way you could have put into the bones of your staff those values than in the literal watching of the response of themselves and their colleagues to this moment.
Yeah. I mean, I know. I hear the ovation and the applause at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard too. My wife and I contribute to it as well.
Awesome.
It's so surreal. Sometimes I wake up and I I'm still in this dream of what's going on today and how digital we are. Emmanuel, let's go over to you. We talked to Emily about leadership. We talked to them about organization and the mission, and just how they manage crisis management. What advice would you give leaders going into their leadership position for the first time?
Okay, so every time I have like a young person that wants to move into leadership, for me, I have something that some people shared with me when I was younger, and that's always stuck with me, and I share that with them. And it's an acronym. In fact, it's called ICED, and with a double D at the end, so ICEDD. And the idea is that first things to do is that I tell them you have to identify quickly, the skills that are most critical to be successful, in the position, in the new role that you are going to embark into. And then after that, the idea is that you need make sure that you clarify as well what he's expecting from you. I think it's very important. Sometimes there's a disconnect, with the level above, which about like the objectives and the role. And then the E of ICE for me, it's usually you inherited a team, or you have sometimes the chance to bring some new people in your organization, but you have to make an evaluation, of that team. And then the first D is very important. It's about collaboration. So you have to build a relationship with the different levels. So with your team, obviously, but you have to develop it with the level above you, and then obviously with your peers, because you are not going to be successful, if you are only, work on your own. And the last D is critical, is that you need to look for the low-hanging fruit and deliver early results, to establish your credibility as a new manager. So that's something that I always shared with, people in my team or people that I'm coaching in the organization, in order to when they start their new role. The other thing, so that's good for the job and to achieve and so on, but more and more people need to realize that when we talk about leadership, we talk about people, and this is like the core of what you are managing, and you have to make sure that you motivate them because you want to make sure that they do what they ought to do. And
right.
The important aspect, and I just have a conversation with a young, let's say, a marketing person from my team about emotional intelligence, and I think this is something critical that people need to absorb, that to become a leader and to perform as a leader, it's not only about the task that you have at hand, and that's not about communication, but it is as well about the ability to understand and manage your own emotions, and as well understand like the people around you and influence the emotion of others. It's not easy, but this is something which is becoming more and more important, especially with the younger generation.
Yeah, I know you talk about emotional intelligence, some of Daniel Goleman's work. Is that something you're using in your own work with coaching, or something you're using at Simrise or in the organization?
Yeah, I mean, this is something that I use, personally. I think this is a critical element. So the people that are in my organization, 3 years ago, I appointed like a new manager, marketing in a team that came from, a level below. And that was very important for me, that he recognized, that element, and been working with him, and so it could be through, coaching. There's a lot of great, let's say, resources online. There's great books that have been published about the topic. But from some of the young generation I've seen, it's a discovery. I mean, some of the people don't understand it. And as I said, someone younger in my organization, I just had like the discussion, and it was very motivated, someone, very, very good at what he does. But the idea is that it's not sufficient enough. You need to understand the context. You need to understand the emotion of others. You need to understand how you are going to manage your own emotions. So,
yeah, right. It's it's a widely used leadership development tool and toolkit. So speaking of which, what are you doing to ensure you continue to grow and develop as a leader?
I think I'm lucky, I have to say, from maybe an own personality, and I'm a constant learner. I always learn, like to learn new things, and I think it's trying to accept as a leader that not accept the status quo about yourself, and always challenge yourself. So I'm always in this constant learning mindset, and this is things that I do all the time, and I do it for me, and I offer it as well to all my team members. So I have and they have as well part of their personal development on a yearly basis. They have to attend either a course. So in fact, two things. So it could be a course, it could be a webinar, it could be conferences, it could be bringing like new I would say suppliers, vendors, in order to expose the team to new things. So that's part of their personal development, and it's something that I really follow very thoroughly with them. The other piece I think as a leader is important is to continue to learn how to let go of things and delegate. It's sometimes difficult, especially when you are maybe like a young leader in your function. But this is critical. And the other aspect is there's a third one is about being transparent and to welcome, I would say, feedback, and the feedback can come from different aspects from your peers, obviously from your boss, but I always welcome the feedback coming from the people of my team. So the door is open and they can come and give me feedback. They just have to make sure that they check in the morning with me. You never know. To accept feedback, you need to be in the right mindset. So the idea is that stop by if you have something to tell me, and then check the temperature of the room, and then and say, hey, are you available? Maybe for like 15 minutes in the course of the day, and because I need to give you feedback, and I always welcome it.
Yeah, checking your temperature in the room is something I try to do with my clients. Because you don't know, what their day is like.
Exactly.
I think I heard Sandeep laughing in the background. I want to bring you in as a CEO yourself. What advice would you give, Sandeep? What advice would you give someone going into leadership for the first time?
Well, you know what, Deepak, I think, here's the way I would think about it. I think leadership pre-COVID was one thing. Leadership current and post-COVID might be something totally different.
Sure.
I think, I liked what Emily was saying earlier on, because, I could tell you, even for our company, look, when you're doing a startup, there's acceptable risk, there's managed chaos. You know what you're getting into. The boundaries of chaos, if that makes sense, have already been defined. That you're a startup. You're trying to find product market fit, right? So now you're going to market, you're trying to get product market fit. And then what happens is COVID comes in and completely decimates the market.
Right.
So now from a leadership point of view, what do you do? Because you're not just trying to steer the ship forward, but now your shipmates, if you will, dealt with the world with, okay, I've got stability at home. I'm just going to work and making sure I'm fighting the good fight. Now it's not just instability at work, it's instability at home. And now they've got this sort of 3D or 4K dimensional set of challenges where now all of us, right, are on the same ship, on the same boat, trying to figure out, is this thing going to sink, or are we going to go make it to port and celebrate a win? And so from that vantage point, what I would say is, leadership styles is, look, anybody that's in a startup organization today sees exactly what's happening. There is transparency happens automatically. right? And from that, especially if you're virtual now, right? So now from that point of view, you know, it comes down to, from a leadership style, it comes down to, you know, one, you know, as a startup, you know, can we sort of, how do we pivot? How do we as a team figure out, how do we take a set of products or services that were once relevant in a pre-COVID world, and how do we establish relevancy in a post-COVID world? And to be honest, you know, all ideas are on the table because you're trying to figure out, can you make payroll? You're trying to figure out, can you deliver a return to your investor group? You know, you're trying to figure out this venture that you've been building for the past 3 or 4 or however many years you've been at it. You know, is it over, or did COVID give you an opportunity to totally reinvent yourself? And how do you sort of methodically think about reinvention in a world where, you know, once there is significant uncertainty that now, quite frankly, might bring significant opportunity, and being able to manage through that with a team is really important. And quite frankly, it's a collaborative effort. You know, as a leader, you know, you've got to show that, hey, look, things are going to be okay and you're going to figure things out. And quite frankly, you're doing this together because you're in the same boat at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So I think what definitely comes to sort of the forefront of communication and forefront of leadership is, how do you sort of create small wins that it's all about celebrating small wins, because, you know, there isn't you know, every small win is a major win, because at least as long as you're showing progression towards something, you're able to sort of at least create a sense of comfort and a sense of, you know, migration or progression within your team. And as long as you're able to do that, you know, that is more important now so than ever. You know, you should be able to at least, you know, stabilize the ship and at least continue down a positive path.
Yeah. Yeah. You know,
if I may here,
Sure.
I think it's interesting because we have, like, obviously different industry represented, you know, between like the 3 speakers. And I have to say that, you know, I feel blessed because the type of industry that I am working, you know, in is, we have been like extremely busy. So we are not facing like the same situation. Obviously, we have been assuring the safety, you know, of our employees, and they are still working on site. We are not, you know, closing anything in terms of production or in terms of lab. We have been rotating team, and you know, I really applaud, like, you know, the people that are there, and then, you know, a lot of people have been working from home. But the idea is that we haven't stopped, and because we are in the food industry, and we are lucky that a big bulk of our sales are not in food service, but, you know, in retail. So obviously, you know, people still continue to eat. So the idea is that we haven't seen really like any weakening of, you know, of our top line, you know, at the moment. So for us, it's more about assuring the safety of our employees, and making sure that, you know, we are as well organizing like the come back to the office, but there's no reopening because we never close. So that may explain as well the different style and the different type of our answer to your questions.
Yeah. I was actually just going to jump in on that too, because I think it calls for different things, right? When you're talking about leaders and asking them to step up, and I'm finding, at least with my leaders in general, what happens when we get nervous, when we're faced with the uncertainty, is we go back to the last thing we were sure about, right? We go back to the last thing we knew. And most of us are promoting leaders because they were really good at executing on the teams they now lead, right? And so what ends up happening is that you see this behavior where people go back and they micromanage, right? Or they become less effective because they get themselves obsessed in this small piece that was their last known quantity. And that is not what we mean when we ask people to step into a role of leadership, right? When you talk about asking someone to step into that leadership position, you're asking them to take on the risk, right? You're asking them to lean in and say, no, this is the part the team doesn't have figured out, right? You're not here to project manage the team for the known. You're here to go chart the unknown, right? And that is the skill that I think is so critical, to help leaders, especially young leaders, when they're making that jump to that next level, to learn how to practice, to do with you, to do with each other, and to hold each other accountable to stepping into that moment of leadership, to chart that course, to not relinquish that authority to lead there back over to somebody else, or to also, I don't know if you guys see this sometimes happening, where they'll be like, well, it's in a group, right? And then all of a sudden it's the groups to decide, which means it's no one's, right? Like, so then they like, there's no accountability. So it's like, well, I don't know. When was the group supposed to get back together and meet? I don't know. What was the deliverable? So, those are some of the techniques I think are even more critical at this moment for young leaders in general, right, across the board, to ensure that you lean into that leadership moment, lean into that opportunity to disambiguate and to keep accountability, especially in this time when there's so much uncertainty.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely sounds very similar to some of the work that, Sheryl Sandberg has done in the book she's wrote around, being the COO of Facebook. Let's stick with you for a second, Emily, and flip to, use leadership as a stepping stone around technology leadership. So it's been said that IT professionals have a challenge with getting to know their business that they operate in. What do you think IT executives can do in terms of a better job to ensure they're getting to know their business better?
So here's my confession. I come from shadow IT.
Okay.
I had my role in leading the web systems and all of the inside of the marketing division, right? And so we built an engineering team inside of marketing, whereas our IT group was focused on everything from, keeping vital clinical systems up and running, email system, all of that really core infrastructure. The digital components were like the extra, right? Which is what we sort of stepped in to run. But now there's no more extra, right? There is no business that isn't a digital business anymore.
That's
right?
true.
So fundamentally, this concept of what an IT leader needs to be and what it means for their business is flipped overnight, right? IT is the business in every business.
Absolutely.
Right? And so you can't operate, and one of the biggest things that I think IT needs to change its perspective on is you can't keep working from this perspective of I'm just here to do an application, right? You have to flip into that mentality of here's either the product I'm building, here's the team I'm on, here's the experience I'm delivering on. And that is a different set of skills than most people who go into IT were there to do, right?
Yeah, I wanna jump in on that because looking at the background of the panelists today, I did think that digital transformation resonated with me across the customer relationship management spectrum. I want to bring in Sandeep, like your work around global Bay, selling that to Verifone, going from a startup, being like a serious technology leader, now leading with Radius 8. Do you have a point of view on shadow IT or some of what Emily is saying?
Yeah, I think Emily's point is valid. I mean, if you think about why Amazon wins, I think the stat is for every dollar spent on the internet, they get about 50 cents of that, like half, right?
Wow.
I mean, it's pretty insane. And the reason why Amazon dominates every vertical market, Amazon didn't think about how to put some retailer out of business. Amazon thought about how do I deliver the best experience possible? And how do I get my customer drunk on the best experience, best buying experience? Regardless if I want to sell you a leotard or a book or, whatever, right? So from that point of view, it's less about the IT system. It's less about the core infrastructure.
Right.
Sure, that is a critical element, of course, of how do you operationalize a business from a ones and zeros point of view. But
Sure.
from a business point of view and how do you change the game, it is all about connecting with the end user experience and what is that ultimate goal that you're trying to deliver. It's less about IT and more about what is the business problem you want to solve and how can IT support it? How can technology support that experience? And when you start to get into that kind of a mindset, that's when you start to win, right? That's when you start to win and really, to be honest, rewrite the playbook in traditional businesses, in traditional markets.
Yeah,
And some of
that's
the
right.
most successful companies do that. And that's exactly what they've done, from Apple to Amazon to so forth and so on.
To Global Bay Technologies, to Verifone, now Radius 8. Let's talk about how you see technology. Two-part question. How do you see technology changing in the marketplace? And what are you and Radius 8 doing to prepare for it?
Well, I think from gosh, I think COVID has had a hand overnight in rewriting what the future of technology, I should say, accelerating what technology was going to be. Honestly, from my point of view, I think the whole idea of remote working, is going to be here, for the long term. I think what you're going to see is, I had a call today with someone in the payment space, and they're thinking about remote transactions, right? They're thinking about contactless, right? So now what happens on curbside pickup, no one wants to no one wants to swipe a credit card anymore. No one wants to sort of dip the credit card for chip and pin. They just want to tap and go, right? They want as much contactless as possible. And so when you think about that from that point of view, exchanging currency, no one wants a dollar bill. They didn't want it before. They definitely don't want it now, because they're worried about, well, where was this piece of currency before? I definitely think, as you sort of think about remote working, you think about doctor visits, right? I think that's telecommunication, telemedicine. That's going to be telehealth. That is 100%. If that was on a path before in terms of being a thing, it is definitely on the path of being a thing now, 100%. From a Radius 8 point of view, quite frankly, the way that we look at the world is, digital was very much, from our point of view, when you think about commerce, people thought about targeting from a personalization point of view. How do I study your click stream? How do I segment you based on some sort of audience type? Maybe it's gender, maybe it's what you have a product affinity towards. Our point of view is, where are you, what's happening around you, and how do we change that experience to get you to do something? We feel that there's this location context aspect of the conversation that's been missing. And that's sort of what we deliver from that vantage point, is for any enterprise, any vertical market that has a digital presence and a physical location, how do you blend the two from a contextual point of view that makes the digital experience relevant to where you physically are? And from a Radius 8 vantage point, that's what we've been focused on delivering, whether it's in restaurant QSR or retail is our primary vertical market. And now the fact that retail stores they're doing the rolling open, how does a customer know? How do you communicate to that customer that the store that's nearest you is going to be open for business? And by the way, know before you go, we have to have a face mask, or we have occupancy levels that are now varying because my store in Menlo Park, New Jersey might be 1,000 square feet versus my store in Summit, New Jersey might be 3,000 square feet. So now the ratio of allowable occupancy rate is going to change. And how do you communicate all that at a hyper local level? And so that's what that's what COVID has done to us in terms of being able to take our technology and solve for commerce. It's now being able to, hey, take this technology and solve for, you want to go to your local restaurant or your local retail store. By the way, these are the things you have to know about. And so for us, it's been kind of interesting and kind of exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. Contactless, double meaning there on the payment side, on the pandemic side, really interesting times. Are you finding Radius 8 is just moving away from like brick and mortar customers in today's environment because of some of the pandemic?
Well, I think that, I think brick and mortar is definitely challenged from obviously COVID. I mean, there's been a legit virus that says you must stay home. And by virtue of that, by you staying home, what are you going to do? You're going to shop more online. But, one interesting fact here, Deepak, is, digital for many retailers have represented maybe between 8 to 10% of their overall business. 90% of the business is still physical brick and mortar. And so we think that the role of brick and mortar is certainly going to change, but we don't think it's going to go away. We think that there's always going to be a need for that consumer touch point, especially for clothing. Hey, for commodity product like the Clorox wipes, you don't ever need to visit a a Genovese or a Pathmark for that, right? But for, from a point of view of clothing, apparel, food, things where you want to touch and feel and try and taste and smell, the physical brick and mortar store is going to be relevant. So our point of view is there's going to be this new partnership with digital and physical that's going to take shape. And we think that there's going to be a new chapter written for where they both coexist, but in a very different state, in a COVID state. So we think that there's very much a role for physical stores, but we think that that's going to change. And we definitely think there's going to be a much stronger marriage between digital and physical, and the roles are going to vary, and they're going to change, be a lot more sort of pervasive between those two.
I want to leave some time for questions. We got about 10 minutes before the top of the hour. Let's go to the audience. Question.
Just quickly, I just want to hear a little bit from Emmanuel on what his, what's going on with your company in terms of, technology's place there in the next 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, great. Let's go to Emmanuel.
Sure. So I do not come at all from the technology background. So we are really like a user of technology within the organization, and there's no shadow IT in the world here. So I think for us the thing that we are looking at, and it's going to be probably basics compared to what I just heard. But the idea is like artificial intelligence is going to be the things that as a company, we are looking at it at a global level. When it comes to, so when we're talking about, food, we are manufacturing flavors, for the food industry. There's a lot of hope that in fact, artificial intelligence is going to help us to develop and create a formulation, from flavors, let's say based on consumer preference at the global level, but as well at the regional level, and to do it, fast, and to do it, aligned, across regions. So that's something it's very, very important to us for the next, 3 to 5 years. And it applies as well to, to market research and trends when it comes to, when it comes to food. So there's a lot of things that could be done with, with AI. And so that's probably the next, the next move for us.
Yeah, that sounds really exciting. One more question for you, Emmanuel. What's one thing you could change about your IT? If there's one thing you could change about your IT environment, what would it be?
Can we have shadow IT, please? Thank you. I think for us, again, it's going to be something basics and basic, because it's the idea that the company have, grown a lot in the years, and there's been a lot of acquisitions with coming from completely different culture of companies worldwide. And of course, everyone comes with their own, systems. And so I think the challenge that we are facing is the technology integration, and the fact that we have systems that could communicate and talk to one another and make the life of the users easier. That would be my wish if I ever want magic one.
Making the life of the users easier. Let's turn to the audience. Questions for our folks here that our executive panel today around digital transformation across the customer relationship management spectrum. We do have one for Sandy or Sandeep. Any insights on how to maintain a good company culture in times where remote work is the new normal or here to stay?
I think that I might be a little biased on that answer, only because being a small company, by default, you're kind of half virtual anyway. From the point of view of you have a sales team that's always out there traveling. You've got to look, for us, everything's in the cloud. When you think about it from a startup vantage point, there's no legacy IT baggage where we've got some server in some room somewhere that you need to think about. Everything for us is G Suite in the cloud. Our entire infrastructure is AWS with Amazon. We have office space as a way to sort of it's communal, right? Where you get to have water cooler talk, or you get to kind of like physically see people. but our core operations, everything is in the cloud by default by, day one of starting this company. So for that vantage point, we're working from home in extended leave from that point of view because of COVID.
Sure.
So we didn't really skip a beat from that vantage point. We were very fortunate, but I have to imagine for companies like Fortune 500 companies where that is not the norm, the struggle might be a little different, right? It might be, they might be faced with different challenges.
Yeah. If I may, because that's
Yeah,
something
please.
that's really changed, the world. And you were talking about the fact that, there's going to be no probably turning back and that there's going to be more and more of remote working. And I completely agree with you. The idea is that for us, even if we had policies, in place for working from home, it's completely different working from home 1 or 2 days a week. And then now, it's my week 10, working from home. So the idea is that's been really a shock, but that's something that I think that the first week at the end of the first week, I think I said it's enough because I was stuck to my computer from 6:30 in the morning until 7:30 at night. And he said, I'm not going to, neither my team going to be able to survive that. So I decided to make sure that I think what was for me important is that we respect everyone, because you could be depending of your your situation with kids at home, or you could be on your own, or with partners and so on, but the idea everyone's life is different. And now when you're looking and talking about work-life balance, it really means something very important. So you have early birds and you have night owls. So the idea is that make sure that everyone knows when people starts and when people want to finish their day, and respect that. Make sure that you plan breaks for you to breathe and go outside and or on your deck or whatever you have. But you had to change your mind, and you need to be, able to, to make that happen. All the things that we have been doing is it's really to over communicate. So we have obviously, WebEx, and we kept our weekly meetings, with member of the team, but we organize, like a lot of other companies, happy hours, which is the idea of, what you would do maybe next to a water cooler, or you are the, the coffee place. And so, once a week we have a happy hour, and we are not allowed to talk about work, but more to take let's say the pulse of, everyone's, situation and well-being. So
let me open it up to everybody. We have a couple of questions. Emily, feel free to chime in. I know we haven't heard from you for a bit. On the technology side, for anyone, Sandeep, Emily, Emmanuel, do you see any possibilities for connected devices or Internet of Things, especially after COVID or post-COVID? Any thoughts on that?
Oh, yeah.
Go for it, Emily.
Big time. So, let's just start with the obvious one where, we talked about telehealth before.
Sure.
This is huge. And there's only so much you're going to do telehealth wise until you need a device in the home. So some of the questions become, what devices are commercially available? What devices can you deploy if you've got someone very skilled? For instance, I could do an EKG, but you can't place the leads yourself. What if I send a technician or somebody to you? So the role for connected devices, I think, is going to be huge in the healthcare space. But I also think in the touchless space, as Sandeep was talking about before, we actually had been thinking about a sort of virtual check-in experience for our practices even before this crisis, and we had made our journey maps. We've actually now gone back and we're now calling them our Germy maps, like GERM, and we're literally evaluating where are the places where people have to touch things and where can we make touchless experiences instead. So that has a lot to do with those connected devices, and some of the IoT stuff, but a lot of that I think is also going to be related to then what's the right place to introduce that. And then also when you do introduce those devices, you introduce way more data and noise that you then have to process, but also potentially new security vulnerabilities, because those devices have historically had a whole host of new challenges that are associated with them. So I think those are just two factors we're going to have to balance in that space.
Just quickly for you, Emily, I wanted to go back to the original question, and then we'll get to the last one. We heard from Sandy at Northwell Health. Any insights you can provide on how to maintain? What are you guys doing to maintain, a good company culture at a place that is already in some capacity used to working remotely, but not in this kind of environment?
So I will say Northwell is not used to working remotely. There was no company culture of working remotely. And yeah, it was crazy. I mean, I started at Lenox Hill Hospital, which was in the city. I live in Brooklyn. I've been commuting out to Long Island every day for the past year and a half because there was no culture of allowing executives to not be physically in the room with one another. And now it's making us rethink everything because we've had to get into that position. And so what I think was part of the balance is you have part of your workforce which has to be there, right? You cannot substitute what's happening in the hospital for those doctors and those nurses. You have another portion of the workforce which could really be anywhere. How do you, inside of the same company, set standards that feel fair, that feel reasonable, and that respect that you've got a lot of these different types of work occurring in the same organization? And I think part of that is being thoughtful about the nature of the work that needs to get done, but also respectful of then to Manuel's point, like what's that time people need from on a personal basis, right? Mm-hmm. A nurse who needs to be in the hospitals might be willing to work, a lot of times they'll work a 3 or a 4-day shift in a row, but then give them 4 days off in a row. Right? Because they need a different work schedule than somebody who's been just working from home, who can still maybe keep a 5-day-a-week work schedule, but maybe their hours are pivoted back because actually they collaborate with a team in California or in India, and therefore their sleep schedules are going to be different, right? So it's about being flexible on many levels.
We're hearing the applause.
I was going to say we need to
top of the hour. Emily Kagan, Trenchard, Vice President, Digital and Innovation Strategy at Northwell. Sandeep Bhanot, good friend of mine, co-founder and CEO of Radius 8, and Emmanuel LaRoche, Vice President, Marketing and Customer Insights at Symrise. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you for having us.
Thank you for making this fireside chat today. Guys, thank you very much. I'd ask you for a drink out, but you probably want to get out of your seat at this point. Maybe when lockdown lifts. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a good one, everybody. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Have a good evening.
The same to you. Bye. Bye, David.